I finally finished the Bloodsworn Trilogy by Gwynn. Let's talk about it. Hi guys, I'm Kyle. Welcome to the Nook. Alright, so if you saw my previous video, then you'll know that I kind of gave a bit of a description of what the world of the Bloodsworn Trilogy is. But if you haven't, and you don't know what it is, this part's going to be for you. So the Bloodsworn Trilogy takes place in this Viking-inspired world on this particular continent called Vigrid. And on this continent, you have humans, monsters called Vessen, and the children of the gods. And each of the children of the gods is kind of imbued with like a specific powers in relation to that god. So you have Berserkir, for example, who are really big, really strong, and can kind of turn into these bearmen. And Ulfrithar, who similarly are the children of the wolf god. They have heightened senses, and they're really cunning usually, and they can turn into wolf-like people. You can tell that this is probably inspired by the idea of the Berserker. And all of these children are really strong, but because of that strength, they are thralls, slaves, to most people. And if they're not slaves, they're hunted down to be slaves or outright killed because they're really powerful and people are scared of them. Why and how are they able to get away with that? You'd imagine because they're the children of the gods. The gods are dead. They died in a massive war called the Guthfala ages ago. But the landscape is still riddled with their bones. And those bones still have power and people seek them out and try to use them for things. And in particular, the continent of Vigrid has kind of been split between three major jarldoms, three major kingdoms that are each vying for control. Each of them having, or at least two of them having, we never learn if the third one has it, one of the skeletons, pretty much the complete skeleton of one of the gods. I don't know if it's very apparent from what I've described yet, but this world is kind of brutal, or at least it's meant to be. I'm gonna be honest, for me, it felt very much more tell than show, at least like through book 1. By book 3, you're kind of getting the idea that the world is brutal, but it's a lot more of, what do you expect? This is Vigrid, which is literally something that people say in the book. And through the first one, it can be very kind of like, alright, well, show me that. Because a lot of the characters, they talk about how hard and brutal the world is, but is it really? I mean, everyone, I don't know, it seems kind of normalish at first. As the story progresses, though, it becomes more and more apparent that the people of this world have to fight for everything. At least the ones that we see, the ones that we know. And a lot of the ones that we see and know turn out to be children of the gods. Bless you. And that kind of brings us to our characters in the story. We have 5 main POVs that we follow throughout the story, 3 of them being protagonist, 2 of them kind of being antagonist. The first 3 we follow from book 1. Elvar, Varg, and Orca. And each of them is kind of on their own quest in the story, but each of those quests follows a similar theme, and that central theme tends to be vengeance. Whether that's for one's family, one's kin, I suppose kin is the same thing as family, or something else. They are all seeking vengeance for something in their life, some sort of retribution because something went wrong somewhere. And along the way, they each kind of figure out what that vengeance means and if realizing it is really important. All 3 of the characters, our main POVs, our protags, are cool and badass in their own right, but honestly, for me, my favorite by the end of book 3 was Orca. Which is funny because at the beginning of book 1, she was not really my favorite. She seemed the most bone dry of the 3, and by the end, she's the most stone cold badass of the entire story. And her story ultimately is also one that is very easy, I think, to kind of sympathize with, especially if you're a parent. It's built around her trying to find her son, who has been kidnapped by these people who are trying to use children of the gods to bring about some awful stuff. I don't know how spoilery I want to be in this. I'm going to try to steer away as much as I can from super big spoilers. Anyways, Elvar, meanwhile, is the first one that we meet. I'm pretty sure. Never mind, Orca is the first one that we meet. But Elvar is the next chapter, I believe, and her story, similarly, it's about vengeance, but it's about vengeance kind of for herself and her retribution against her father, as well as figuring out her place in the world, because she doesn't want to be what he wants her to be. And what he wants her to be is basically like someone that he can marry off for political gain in the world. And so when we meet her, she's run off and joined a mercenary guild that is involved with hunting down and enslaving children of the gods. And so then through the 3 books, a lot of her story kind of is built around kind of reconciling that aspect of herself and figuring out who she wants to be and what she's going to be. Varg, meanwhile. Varg starts out as an escaped thrall who is searching for his sister and to figure out what happened to her so that he can get vengeance on her. And in doing that, he ends up coming across the Bloodsworn, another mercenary band, and joins them. And his story is all about kind of figuring out his own power, his own strength, as well as gaining that vengeance and retribution for his sister while getting swept up, much like everybody else, into the changing tides of the world throughout the entire story. The last two then are Bior and Guthvar, who we start getting POVs for in book 2. They're there in book 1, but we start getting them in book 2, and their stories, Guthvar's honestly kind of dragged. Every time I came up to one of his chapters, I was like, oh, him again. Bior's, though, is really interesting, because with him, we get to see a juxtaposition of what he's doing, which is trying to make the world better for his people, versus what he wants to do. And what he wants to do is at odds, because he doesn't feel like the means they are going about to make the world better is the right way to do it. And so watching that play out is, for me, it was a lot of the emotional heart in the story. I'm sure that wasn't what the author was going for, which is something we will circle back to. But for me, his story was one of the most interesting ones for what it was trying to do. Guthvar, meanwhile, is just a slimy, skeezy scumbag of a person, biggest coward in the story, whose only goal is basically to better himself. He's one of those characters you love to hate, you know? And that's really all there was to him. He pretty much gave another angle at looking at the antagonists, and again, that's literally all there was to it. There's nothing else really for his story, at least that I saw. Circling back, like I said, to the themes kind of in the story, the action in this story was fantastic. I have never read a book that did action so well, that was so impactful with every movement. It was so well choreographed on the page. But when it came to a lot of the themes, a lot of what the story was trying to do, it fell flat in a lot of ways. The emotional beats didn't have the resonance that they felt like they should have had. They happened, and as they were happening, I felt like I should feel like, oh my god, this is going on. But there were only maybe 2 or 3 across all 3 books that actually did that for me. Meanwhile, there's at least 5 that are actually trying to do that. And that honestly includes the ending of the book. The book ended, and I enjoyed it. But it ended kind of flat for me. And that was a little disappointing. Everything wrapped up so neat at the end of the story, and I just don't know how I feel about that. I kind of like it, I kind of get it, but also, I guess in some way it didn't feel earned. There's a lot of questions that I have about what the world was really, what was really different. Because a lot of the major stuff in the climax of Book 3 happens in an isolated area of the world, of the map, literally, just an isolated section of the map. And so it raises the question of these big things happened, and the world has in some ways been very reshaped, and the political landscape, oh god, don't even. When it comes to the day-to-day person, I'm a little bit wondering, how is this actually going to change things? So, for instance, to kind of get into spoiler territory here, warning if you don't want to see that, Elvar ends up freeing a lot of her thralls before the big final battle. Along with that, she gives the Bloodsworn their own freedom. And everyone's talking about how she's changed the world, but there's still so many people out there in the world who are not at this final battle. Has she really changed anything is kind of the big question. Not to mention, there's a whole other continent with a giant-ass empire that we hear about and we see a little bit of. There's a lot of things that try to get connected right at the end, and it feels like it could have been left for either another story, or it could have been expanded out further into more book, but it really just does raise that question. But again, the action of the story is so incredible, and those emotional moments that they do hit really hard. So at the end of the day, when I finished it, I did find myself looking at the shelf where I have Malice here, and I did find myself going, man, I cannot wait to get started on this one. So at the end of the day, despite everything, I would still say this is, for me, a 4 out of 5 star read. So yeah, I would say, if you like Vikings, if you like stories about dead gods and world-shattering cataclysms, then this is probably a book for you. Alright guys, if you enjoyed that review, leave a comment down below. Alright guys, if you enjoyed that review, like, subscribe, leave a comment down below. I'm interested in knowing what you guys are reading right now. I always need more things to read, and if I'm being honest, I've been in a bit of a book slump. I'm about to start reading something that will hopefully yank me out of it. So far, my book reading list is falling apart at the seams, but we'll see what happens next here. Anyways, I have more things planned for the future here, so come back next time. I will see you guys later.